discuss activity 2 of your unit 2. Sabi doon, you are going to determine the accounting elements. So, you are given 3 requirements. The first requirement is for you to identify what are the accounting elements that are being affected throughout the operation of Mr. Pete. And then, second requirement, you are going to identify the total amount of your asset, liability, and then equity. And then lastly, you are going to prepare a pro forma statement of financial position and then statement of comprehensive income. But before we go further sa problem, I just want to have a recap for the financial elements or the elements of your financial statements. We have said before that there are 3 main elements of your financial statement. That is your asset, and then your liability, and then your equity or capital. So later on sa mga problems natin or later on in your higher accounting, you will be encountering the word capital. That is the same with your equity. Sabi natin, the basic equation of your accounting is that asset is always equal to liability plus capital. So ano ang ini-imply ng equation na yan? Sabi natin, the things that we own in the business or yung pagmamayari ng business, the resources of the business will either come from liability or equity. Yung utang from outside, from the creditors, or investment of the owners. So, yun ang sinasabi ng basic equation na yan. And then, in your unit 2, if you are going to read that one, there are listed examples of your elements. By the way, last time we also discussed that for your asset, you have current asset and then non-current asset. For your liability, you have current liability and then non-current liability. That is very important because you will use that in the preparation of your financial statements. So, una, asset. Sabi natin, current. And then, sabi natin, non-current. So, in the module that I gave you, or in the notes that I gave you, there are listed examples of current asset and non-current asset. First thing sa current asset, first example is cash. Ayan, so cash, pera. Ayan, so that is that is current asset, except when the one I told you last time, when it is restricted for future use, for building purposes, for long-term use. Yun, kung na-restrict yung cash na yun, that is the time that we consider it as non-current. But generally, the classification of cash is current asset. Number 2. Accounts receivable. Ang accounts receivable, ito yung pautang natin. Ibig sabihin, your collectible. Halimbawa, the form of your business is service. So, in your past units again, nabanggit doon na there are 3 forms of business na pinagsisilbihan ng accountants. First is your service. Second is your merchandise, and then third is your manufacturing. For the service, of course, kumikita ka in rendering your services. And then, for the merchandise, kumikita ka in selling. Nagre-retail ka. In manufacturing, you make your own products and then you sell it. Yun ang difference ng manufacture sa merchandise. Sa merchandise, you do not produce your own product. You buy and then you sell. And then, sa manufacturing, you make and then you sell. Yun. So, for accounts receivable, ito yung mga collectible natin. Ito yung for servicing, services na na-render natin na hindi pa nabayaran sa atin. Halimbawa, nag-open ako ng accounting office ko. Nag-render ako ng accounting service, and then then during that time, it was not yet paid. Hindi binayaran ng customer ko. Sabi, pwede bang next month na lang kasi wala pa kaming kita for now. So that is possible in businesses. Credits are allowed in businesses. And then, the consideration of that is accounts receivable. Pautang ko siya. However, that is considered as asset because in the future it will be, it's my resource. And then, in the future, halimbawa, magigipit ako ng pera, i-collect ko siya. And then, another example is your notes receivable. Okay, so the difference of your accounts receivable and notes receivable is that in notes receivable, there is a presence of a promissory note. So, may note siya na sasabihin and then the name of the debtor, and then sasabihin nagkautang kay the creditor ng amount, and then sasabihin yung time kung kailan siya babayaran. So, yun ang difference ng notes receivable sa accounts receivable. Sa accounts receivable, you have no notes that will be evidencing your collectibility. But then, for the notes receivable, may evidence because of the presence of the notes. However, pareho rin lang na both are collectible from our customers. And then number 4, another example is your accrued interest receivable. So for accrued interest receivable, if there is a word accrued, ibig sabihin, na-render mo na siya, you have already rendered it, pero hindi pa siya nabibigay sa'yo. So, later on, you will be encountering So later on, may encounter kayo na ganito, accrued salaries income, accrued rent income. Ang ibig sabihin yan, na-render mo na yung service sa kanila or nabigay mo na yung gusto nila, yung demand ng customer, however, hindi pa siya nababayaran. That is still considered as receivable. So, accounts receivable, notes receivable, accrued interest receivable, accrued salaries income. These are examples of collectibles ng company. And then, number 5, another example in your notes, you have your inventories. Okay, so for inventories, these are assets na nag-e-exist if your company is merchandising and manufacturing. So we will not be encountering this in your subject, in this subject, because ang focus ng subject natin ay servicing. But later on, for us to know ano nga bang inventory. So ito yung mga stocks ng company, goods ng company na nakastock yun, na ibibenta pa lang natin. So for example, yung business natin is a grocery store. Yung mga goods na hindi pa natin nabibenta, yung mga dilata, yung mga damit, yung mga sapatos, na hindi pa natin nabibenta, ang tawag dyan ay inventory. Yun, so that is considered as inventory. Number 6, another example is prepaid supplies. Okay, so later on again, you will be encountering elements na may kasamang word na prepaid. Prepaid supplies, prepaid salaries, yung mga yun. Prepaid supplies, prepaid salaries. Ang ibig sabihin niyan, nabayaran mo na siya ahead of time, pero hindi mo pa siya nakukonsume. So, ibig sabihin yung prepaid supplies, nabili natin siya na supply, pero hindi pa natin siya nakukonsume. That is considered as an asset of the company. However, kung makukonsume na natin siya, that will be considered as your supplies expense kung magagamit mo na siya. But since hindi mo pa siya nagagamit, prepaid supplies. So, those are the examples of your current assets. Later on, madadagdagan at madadagdagan pa yan. But these are the current assets na usually nag-i-exist sa operation ng isang company. And then, another one is your non-current asset. Again, in your notes, may mga nakalista na example ng non-current asset. Number 1, sabi dyan, land. Alam ko naman na alam natin yan. Okay, so land. As long as hindi siya binibili and then nire-resale, yun, that is considered as non-current asset. Anong gagawin natin sa piece of land na binibili ng business? Bibilhin ng business and then ibebenta ka agad. Kasali siya sa inventory. But if the land is for the business use, gagamitin ng business purposes, halimbawa pagpapatayo ng building, parking ng building, that is considered as your asset. And then, buildings. What else? Furniture and fixtures. So again, sabi natin, yung non-current asset, these are the resources of the company, the ownership of the company, the ownership of the business that you expect to use for a long period of time. Ang land, kung hindi natin yan ibebenta, we will use that for a long period of time. And then buildings. We know that building will not be used for 6 months or 1 year. Alam natin that that will last for a long period of time. Furniture and fixtures, another thing, equipment, yung mga sasakyan, yung mga sasakyan ng company, that is considered as your non-current asset. And then next, your liability. Again, sabi natin sa liability, you have your current, and then you have your So, you have your current liability and then non-current liability. The most common example for your current liability is accounts payable. Okay, so dito naman sa accounts payable, this is the exact opposite of accounts receivable. Sabi natin sa accounts receivable, ito yung mga pinautang natin, na kukolektahin natin. Ito naman, accounts payable, ito yung mga utang natin na kukolektahin sa atin. And then another one, you have your notes payable. Again, the difference of these two is the presence of notes. Gagawa ka ng promissory note. Halimbawa, your business is named Red. So, I, Red Business, borrowed an amount of blah, 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 to Yellow or from Yellow Company that will be paid on blah, 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 blah. Sign this date of June 30, 2020. If June 30 mo sinign, and then yun yung ibibigay mo sa kanya as a proof ng utang. So, the difference of accounts payable and notes payable is the presence of notes. And sometimes, ang notes, by the way, sometimes ang notes, may dalawang classification yan. You have your interest bearing and then non-interest bearing. And then, you will be encountering this later on in your higher accounting. So, ang interest bearing, nakalagay din sa promissory note. I promise to pay 20,000 with the interest of 5% on June 30, 2020. Yun. So, isa din yun sa mga mag-a-appear sa notes. Yung presence ng interest. Lalagay doon kung non-interest siya o interest siya. You will be discussing this in your business math and then in your higher accounting. Another example of your current liability is your accrued interest payable. So, sa accrued interest payable, tayo ang magbabayad dyan. Na-render na sa atin yung service and then hindi pa natin nababayaran. So, we are going to pay. Another one, accrued salaries payable. Ibig sabihin, na-rendered na ng employee yung service na sa atin. However, hindi pa natin nababayaran yung employee natin. So, i-accrue natin siya. So, yun yung ibig sabihin ng accrued. Basta yung sa accrued, ibig sabihin na-render na yung service pero hindi pa siya nababayaran. Another example of your current liability, you have your SSS premium payable and then you have your withholding tax payable. So if we are a business, we have our own employees, of course. Part of their salaries is mapupunta sa SSS tsaka mapupunta sa tax. And then, sa SSS and then sa tax, may share yung employer, may share yung employee. And then, since ang bayaran is every 15 days, ang bayaran ng mga employees, I mean the payment of the salaries, every 15 days. So, halimbawa, June, usually ibibigay yung sweldo nila June 15 and then June 13. Every payment of salaries or every payroll, we-withhold sila ng portion ng salaries ng employee na mapupunta sa SSS tsaka withholding tax. And then, marilimit lang to at the end of the month. So, during those times, ibig sabihin, may babayaran ka sa SSS, may babayaran ka sa BIR. So, that is considered as your SSS premium payable and then withholding tax payable. Because it's the responsibility of the employer to pay for the SSS and tax of the employee. I mean, tayo. Kung ako yung employer, ako yung magre-limit ng SSS tsaka tax ng employee ko. Yun, so that is part of the law of the Philippines na employer, they are responsible sa SSS tsaka tax ng empleyado nila. Another one, you have your pag-ibig and then you have your PhilHealth. Yung mga withhold during the middle of the month, kung nagbibigay tayo ng salary nila at the middle of the month, and then nare-limit lang siya at the end of the month. So, during yung time na withhold natin sila, i-consider natin sila as your payable. Another thing, non-current. Non-current liability. So, ano yung mga example ng non-current liability natin? Sabi natin last time, basta one that does not meet the qualifications of your current. So, if yung utang na yon, yung utang natin na yon is more than, sabi natin, more than 1 year or your operating cycle, that is considered as non-current asset. I mean, non-current liability. Basta hindi na-meet yung qualification ng current, i-consider na natin siya as non-current. And then, you have your equity capital. So, or equity or capital. So, for your equity or capital, listed there, yung owner's equity tsaka withdrawal. Okay, so sa owner's equity, this is the investment of the owner. So halimbawa, ang owner ng business, si Peter Pan. At the beginning of the year, nagbigay siya ng 1 million. So, ang gagawin natin dyan, Peter Pan, capital, or equity, 1 million. Yan, so that is an example of the owner's equity. For the withdrawal naman, ito yung wini-withdraw ng owner for personal use. So, outside use of the business. So, kung yung pera ginamit ng may-ari for personal use or personal transactions, that is considered as your withdrawal. So, halimbawa, at the middle of the year, si Peter Pan, kumuha siya ng 50,000 para mag-tour sa Thailand. So, that is a personal transaction. Wala naman siyang ginawa, magtutour lang siya. Hindi naman para makatulong sa business, para ma-improve yung alam niya sa pag-manage ng business. No. Plainly, ang reason ni Peter Pan, pupunta sa Thailand para mag-relax at mag-enjoy. Ang gagawin mo naman dyan, Peter Pan, withdrawal, 50,000. Ayan, so, Peter Pan capital, owner's equity, and then Peter Pan withdrawal, that is your withdrawal, example ng withdrawal. So, basta, pag ginamit ng owner for personal use, that is considered as withdrawal.